Okay, we're live, and thanks for hanging out with Alan and Bruce.
Hey, thanks for having me.
New host, Bear's gone. He's gone forever. No, he's doing a photo shoot today. He got invited to help on a photo shoot last minute. It was something he couldn't pass up, and but I'm happy to have Bruce here. Anyway, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So, Bruce, what do you do? Who are you?
Well, I'm a genre landscape illustrator. Landscapes are just definitely my thing. And these days I'm working for small to medium-sized clients, mostly in like indie computer gaming and tabletop gaming. And I started exhibiting at conventions just this year.
Yeah, you follow me everywhere I go, and you also go to places I'm not at. That's what I want to talk to you about. Is I don't think I would be surprised if there were anybody in the industry that didn't know you by looking, that doesn't at least know your name.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I know it is a small industry, at least like fantasy illustration is a fairly tight-knit community. So I've definitely made really good inroads in our community, but I don't know. I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't know me, especially more on like the concept art, gaming side of things. I don't think I've really expanded there as much. But you know, the people who go to like Spectrum or IlluxCon or something like that, a
Right.
lot of them seem to know me these days, and that's
And
a very new thing.
so landscapes, is that pretty much, is that all? I mean,
I mean, that's my focus, and I've been trying to be more focused. That's a message that I've heard from a lot of people who would know that, especially at the beginning of your career, it's very good to pick something that you're passionate about, that's already kind of coming out a lot in your work without having to force it, and then sort of run with that for a while. And I mean, I do other sorts of stuff. I do figurative work. I think it's important to learn and practice that.
hmm.
But in terms of client work, what gets me out of bed in the day is painting a really sexy cliff face or something like that.
Just going after that clip face
Oh,
or that distant sunbeam coming out of the
I love
clouds.
geology. I love, just different kinds of vegetation and things. I've traveled a lot.
That's what I was gonna say. You've traveled. How many countries have you gone to?
I think it's probably around 33 or 34 countries.
You knew the number. You knew the exact no. Okay,
More or less.
so you're pretty well traveled, you'd say.
Yeah, I think I'm fairly well traveled. I've got a few continents still to get to, but I definitely want to continue doing a lot more of that.
Yeah. And when did you when did you start traveling? Was that right out of school or?
Well, as a kid, my family, they were all really travelers too, but it wasn't international travel for the most part. We were doing lots of camping trips, so I got to see a lot of the national parks here in the US.
Right.
And then later on, maybe high school, college, I started getting some opportunities to do more international travel. My father was going to some international conventions, and he'd bring my sister and me along. So we got to go to the Middle East, we got to go to Singapore, we got to do a few cool things like that. And then I just kind of kept running with that. In college, I had some opportunities to study abroad in Turkey, to do a field sketching trip to Southern Africa.
Oh,
And then after college, I kind of burned out on art briefly because there didn't really seem to be an avenue forward for me from the school that I was at to the industry that I wanted to be in. And I'd had some Chinese friends in college. I learned a little bit of Chinese, and there's just a huge demand for uh, English language teachers over there. It's a great kind of supply and demand situation to have, kind of the opposite of what is the case for most artists trying to get a job. So I figured I'd scratch that itch. I ended up living in China for 6 years and traveled a lot around East Asia before finally deciding it was time to come back and make my mark and try to get into the industry that I really wanted to be a part of.
Okay, so you didn't get burned out after, or was it like going to China gave you more fuel for that fire, or?
I mean, I figure after 6 years, if it's something that is in you to do, it should be possible to go back to it.
That's
I
true.
spent a lot of time writing while I was in China, and I spent a lot of time observing things. I did do some sketching, I did some little projects here and there. It just wasn't a very concerted effort, like the sort of thing that you and I know is really necessary to
Right.
get skills up to the proper level in this industry.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I think a lot of people come out of college with the same outlook that you did. That like, let's say you want to be an illustrator or paint for books or concept art, which I grew up around a lot of video games, concept art, and things. And so when you're out of college, you're like, well, I have the degree now. Who's going to give me a job?
Right, right. Like the companies should be crawling over themselves clearly to give me a job. At least there must be an introductory or junior position here somewhere.
Right.
And for the most part, that doesn't really exist. You have to have your skills at a very high professional level to get much in this industry.
Yeah. Even at
That's,
the intern level where you're not getting paid, you still have to be just outstanding.
yeah, I mean that's the level of the competition that's out there, and that's the state of the industry as it is.
Mhm.
So yeah, I wasn't ready when I came out of college, so I decided to do something else, and then later I was ready.
Yeah, that's something that I realized coming out of Spectrum for the first time is that we have a really unique career in that the second that you step out of school and even before that, you're suddenly competing with all of your heroes.
Yeah,
It's not like you're a lawyer and it's like, oh, well, I'll start with some pro bono cases or some smaller cases in my town and then go to New York. It's like, nope, you're in New York now. What do you do?
well, you're not quite like competing for jobs with like Donato and Greg Manchess or some of those guys, but it's definitely it is a small pool, and it's definitely a really intimidating skill jump there to get in there,
Right.
even if
Yeah. And
you win.
I think that especially if you were to look into it 5, 10 years ago, there's not as many jobs as there are potential illustrators.
Yeah.
Now with Kickstarter and Patreon, the rules have shifted a little bit and kind of teeter totter to the opposite direction. But it still kind of, if you're looking for an 8 to 5 job, there's not really enough to feed every illustrator in the world.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially something like concept art where there's about 1 billion people who
Mhm.
want in on that industry, and the industry needs, I don't know, like a few hundred of them. Like,
I honestly don't know. I mean, I've gotten work from a lot of different people as a concept artist too. Actually, I think a majority of my work has been concept art, and it's weird where it pops up. I had somebody message me. I said this on the show. Somebody messaged me to design a metal sign, which I would put under concept art.
okay. Well, I think yeah, you could say there's some one-off stuff, but I mean like that 9 to 5 concept art job,
Right.
you know, really doesn't exist in huge numbers. There's a few people who will get that, and most of those are what, like senior concept art positions. Those are mostly going to be people who can demonstrate that they have a strong understanding of the pipeline in the industry, and who have really just solid fundamentals and a strong area of focus, probably in something, like could be environments or could be character design or what have you.
Yeah, like so many elements came together. Luckily for them, well,
Yeah,
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might know, I'm pretty sure Tyler Jacobson got a job right out of college, right out of his schooling.
sure. And you do have a few exceptions to the rule, but those are going to be people who really
Mhm.
pushed themselves to an exceptional degree in an earlier, like at a very young stage of their life.
Or I had like maybe good opportunities. I mean, skill is a lot of it, but to, if you're at like a local school versus going to an actual illustration school, that can make a difference.
Right. Well, and
So,
the flip side of that, though, is I've talked to Tyler about that, and he's said very specifically, like, he's still paying down massive loans and stuff. Like,
right.
so he paid for that opportunity of having like a senior project thing where like Irene Gallo and like other big name potential clients came to that. But I mean, yeah, he's still not able to pay off what that cost him even
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, that's something we want to do a big education show or maybe 1 to 3 part show on education because it's such a big deal, the mythos surrounding it and what people don't know going in and coming out, that we wanted to get Tyler Jacobson and a few other people on the show to talk about it. People that would agree and disagree on certain topics, So,
Came to it from different angles, different ways to get that information
mhm.
and that I guess not notoriety, but get their name out there.
Right. And we're okay. So we're here to talk about the opposite side, not having those privileges in life.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you step out of the door and you're like, wait, how do I break into this industry? Right? It can seem like a brick wall or a mountain.
Yeah. Or like in my case, where I was gone from the country for 6 years, I lost most of I lost contact with the people that I knew from art school, for the most part. Or I mean, I don't want to make it make it sound like like they were just like dissing me or something. But you're in a country that blocks Facebook for 6 years. You're going to lose contact with people. And I came back to the States and worked on my skills when I realized that was very necessary. And 2 years ago, I didn't really know anyone in this industry. I mean, I can say that very very bluntly. 2 years ago, if you're one of my many friends in fantasy illustration now, you didn't know me. You'd never have heard of me at that
Right.
point.
Well, I met you kind of a year ago in Smart School.
Right.
So
So I mean, that's a year ago, right? But like
yeah,
longer than exactly 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago was when I realized that networking was a thing that I needed to do,
right.
that it was crucial, that no matter how good my skills got, I would never get as far as if I had networking on my side. And
Mhm.
making friends, like making real friends in the industry, is just such an important thing and needs to be given the same importance and same priority as improving painting skills or drawing skills.
And it's something that can sound, 2 years ago, I think if you had, hell, me 2 years ago, someone out of school, if you had approached them from where you are now, or anybody in the future coming out of school listening to this, if 2 years sounds very daunting, I mean, it does sound very daunting, right? If I tell you, oh, it's going to take 2 years of not painting and just kind of networking to get to
Well, no,
talk to people.
doesn't mean you give up painting.
No,
Like
you're still painting, but it's like somebody told me one time that if you're an artist with a 5 day week, 4 of those days would have to be painting, and then you would have to commit a whole day to business, networking, and then personal business and management and things like that.
I mean, that can take the form of social media and things that don't necessarily mean you have to travel very far or take
No.
a lot of time out of your day. Like that can be spread across the whole week. I don't think it needs to be considered so daunting. I mean, I think a lot of people coming out of college probably they will see like those time periods, like 5 years of leveling up your skills
Hmm.
or 2 years of working on your network of friends and contacts in the industry. Sounds like a long time. It's really not a very long time. This is a
Yeah.
marathon, not a sprint. And you shouldn't see it as something where you're just going to immediately get gratified. You're going to immediately get these positions, even like the bare bones bottom positions that you want in the industry. You need to work towards it in a sustained fashion.
So what are some things that you did in particular? Because you are very known. What are some things that you do or decided to do to stay relevant or become relevant?
Well, yeah, let's start with becoming relevant because I think there's something really interesting to say here. The thing that made the biggest difference for me was taking part in the art business boot camp, which you may or may not have heard of. That's Lauren Panapinto and Mark Sheff. They're doing some classes in business for artists, including some intensives that they've opened up now and the art business boot camp. And when I look at that, that was really like a huge, huge changeover for me. As soon as I saw that they were offering that, I was like, okay, entry into the community that they're creating around this thing, like just the self-motivated artists who are going to be part of the secret Facebook community and stuff like that. That's by itself, that's worth the price of entry.
That's not something I realized going into smart school a year ago is the community that would broaden from, let's say, even like the 10 people I talked to out of it.
Oh yeah, classes are huge. You know, classes are a shared struggle,
Hmm.
and that tends to enhance bonding with people who are also sharing the same struggle. They're also, if you're doing something like Smart School, you're doing something like the Art Business Boot Camp or what have you. You know, those are people who are investing their money
Hmm.
in a very important and difficult kind of learning. And so that's, you know, those are going to be the people that you definitely form the strongest bonds with in the community, I think,
You,
relatively easily.
you hit a really good point, which is like, yeah, you could go on Facebook and add everybody who calls themselves an illustrator, or you could pay $500 or what. So what did the art business boot camp cost?
I think so. I managed to get, like, they had a coupon on Infected by Art at the time. I actually managed to get it at a discounted rate. It was, I don't know, like around $100 or something like that. I mean, it was honestly, in terms of what it offered, in the end, it was a
Right.
negligible amount of money.
Well, but it's still a good point. Like what you're doing, you're paying $100 to meet people who are also willing to pay $100, right? And that
The
kind of,
self-select group, yeah,
yeah, and it's
be,
being selective and
to get to know.
yeah, instead of meeting the people
And
that are just doing it maybe as more of a hobby or not as committed. It's important to meet more committed
right,
people.
yeah, people who are putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and they're like, okay, no, I'm going to make this thing work. I'm going to make this sustainable.
Mhm.
I'm going to make this my career. You want to find opportunities, whether it's workshops or online classes or art business type of forums, where you're gonna meet those people who are really, like, they're going for it, and they'll motivate you to go for it too. Because right after I did that, even before the class properly started, we were all, introducing each other, like getting to know each other and um, encouraging each other to go out and do things that were outside of our comfort zone. So as a result, as a direct result of that class, it's so funny because I can see like this cascade of choices that follow on from it that aren't directly related to the class, but they're all because I did that and I put myself in that mindset. So like I started going to every crab jab gallery opening, like for the last 2 years, pretty much. I've been at almost all of them, and that's a local institution here in Seattle that promotes fantasy illustration and illustrators in general and things of that nature. So there's a lot of local artists who go to that and a lot of great people you can meet. Um, are you still there, man?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, your picture died,
Oh,
and I'm just,
yeah,
of
it's all
course.
right.
Okay. I wouldn't have known about One Fantastic Week without that because suddenly I had just, Facebook friended a whole bunch of people from the boot camp, and I saw these other groups that they were part of, and a lot of people seemed to be part of that one. So I joined that, and that's how I got the opportunity to help Peter Moorbacher at his first Emerald City Comic Con booth. So that was another opportunity to kind of like that followed on from that, to meet even more people and to go and meet the people that he meets after a con and get to know how to do cons.
That sounds almost exponential from taking that first investment.
Yeah, and you say things like, Bruce, you're following me around, or you're kind of omnipresent, and it's because of that exponential sort of growth from that initial point where I decided, okay, I'm gonna go for this full force, and I'm going to be part of this community. And every decision on from that, it's just kind of been like saying yes to a lot of opportunities that have come up and pushing myself out of my comfort zone.
It's neat how when you can kind of, you're promoting yourself, but you're also working for yourself. And when so much of what you do is surrounded by your actions, it's easy to look back 5, 6, 10 steps and say, oh, if I hadn't have done that thing 3 years ago, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. I'm very happy that I did that thing, because, so many other things have definitely come out of that. And, you can't always assume that you're going to get job opportunities immediately out of this kind of thing. It's more like you build up levels of trust with people over time. You build up levels of like you helping them, and they want to help you on down the line because you're just a nice person and you're a part of their community. And so doing different kinds of things can then sort of become a greater than the sum of its parts situation, and really get you towards the goals that you have in mind for your career.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. I think so. What, like, if you could list off some solid rules, let's not get to that yet. So what do you do on social media? Because we were talking before the show and you seemed very knowledgeable about some of the moves and actions you were making on social media, and you were explaining some to me.
Okay, well, anything specific you'd like to start off with?
I don't know. I mean, so what? Okay, if you had to tell somebody, oh, how do I break into Facebook, or how do I break into Instagram? How do I get more followers and things like that?
I think the main thing there is reliability. Like, people need to form habits that include you, and so you need to have a schedule. You need to be like, okay, I'm going to post twice a week, or I'm going to post 3 times a week. You want to have varied content, so you want to have a little bit that's showing who you are and getting people to buy into that. Like they like some aspect of your personality speaks to them. Maybe it's in a humorous way, or it's in a, you do a lot of travel, I like to do a lot of travel, and it's neat to hear about your adventures. You see other people who do it really well, like Darren Yao, for example, is always doing his memes. Like, that's just, you pick something about your personality that speaks to people, that's a genuine thing, and usually you can find a way to make that work for you on social media. So you have some of that stuff, and you also, you show your art, you show how you do your art. You get people to buy into that and get involved and make yourself a part of their lives in some small way.
Yeah, so be genuine, but also kind of have an equation about it.
Right, like you can think about who you are, things that you like to do normally, like anyway, but then think about like, okay, how is this going to draw people in? Like, you can build on who you are in a strategic way, I guess is what I would say.
So are you ever tactical or very mindful of some of the actions that you make? Are you ever looking on the newsfeed and are like, I don't have to comment on this, but I will because I need to stay relevant.
I mean, I think it goes both ways. There's times when you're like, I could comment on this, but I won't.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right, of
you can
course.
definitely put forward some negative things that you don't want to be out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also judiciously choose, like, okay, like this is something, this is a topic that I feel I have something to speak about.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have something in my experience that will connect with that other person's experience, and we can have a conversation, and that will build that relationship just a little bit more.
Right. Um, One thing Bear and I haven't talked about on the show, but we kind of wanted to talk about later is the idea of developing a professional or kind of a not different, developing a personality. And we both love reading about art history,
Mm-hmm.
and we found that every relevant artist of the time, Warhol, Rothko, Rockwell, Leyendecker, they crafted, and if you even look today, Donato will talk about it in his
Sure.
class, crafting a personality that is not fully you, but is more of what people would expect from the artist. And do you think that that's a part of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Going back to who I was maybe before all of this, I used to be like a wallflower. I used to be one of the shyest people you'd ever meet in any group situation. I still have social anxiety issues that I have to kind of like fight back against.
Mm-hmm.
And I've made a concerted effort over the years. But one of the things that I learned by going to China and teaching is that you can put on that performer mask, and you can kind of step outside of your fears, and you can just step into the moment and kind of just say yes to it. And that's both not a part of you, but also becomes a part of you, especially over time. You can make that part of you. I mean, we aren't rocks, unchanging over time. Like we can definitely change, and we can add aspects to our personality. I think that it's good to still, like, maybe there's some part of your personality that wants to come out but can't very easily because of social anxiety or shyness or what have you, an introverted personality and such. But
Well,
you can find ways to amplify that.
that kind of circles back to what you're saying. Pick out something that you like about your paintings that you're already passionate about, and then bring it forward in all of your work. And you're saying kind of the same thing with your personality. Like what are you passionate about personally, and bringing that into conversations and in social environments.
Yeah, absolutely. I find, it's weird to say like being helpful to people as a strategy, but that kind of is my strategy. That like I naturally really like helping people.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the few useful lessons I can think of from like some jobs, like retail hell type stuff, that I wasn't otherwise excited about. But I learned about myself that I really like helping people. That was actually something I found exciting about the job,
Yeah.
and I've kind of taken that also to my artist persona. Is that if there's a time when I can take a moment and put someone in touch with the right person that will make a big difference for them, or if I can take a moment and you know connect someone to the resources that they need to get ahead, then I'll do it. And that definitely makes a big impact on people. They remember that, and that's also another big part of why people know and remember me and like me in this community.
I like that you say that. I also like to be very helpful. I think it brings me joy to help other people. That's one reason I started the podcast. I was like, well, I like to share information. That's why I was doing those free tutorials. And I was like, and I also want to give people something to listen to while they work. So those two things kind of came together. But also, you mentioned something about creating a personality. And that's something else that I wound up doing, which is because I can have social anxiety. And so anytime I felt uncomfortable, I would just I think Lauren Panapenta talked about this on a post one time. She said, and it wasn't like her original idea. It was an old thing. I can't quote it exactly, but she said, figure out who you want to be, or think of like a TV character that is who you want to be, and then just pretend to be them for a
Yeah.
while. And then it's
Just
kind of like fake it until you are that thing.
yeah. I mean, it's very much that's what I was doing as a teacher. There were a lot of times where I just, I imagined a clown or an entertainer, and then I kind of put myself into those shoes
Hmm.
and just stepped into the shoes and did it. And that turned out to be a good strategy for situations that would otherwise be really hard for me to take on.
Right. So, oh, let me see what time it is. Sorry, I can't look at my computer. 4:35. That's cool. So halfway through, I really wanted to talk about conventions too, because we're
Sure.
both about to go to a convention, right?
Yeah, we've got Rose City Comic Con coming up this next weekend, and I think you kind of like got in off of the wait list, like kind of last.
Yeah,
Like, how did that
yeah. I've been rushing. Oh, I wasn't sure because I was trying to look for like Airbnbs and places that were more affordable because I don't like paying, extremely high hotel prices and then
Sure.
coming out with a lower profit. I have when I went to Gen Con last year, I literally slept in a house with like 4 other Airbnbers just so I could save money.
It's a
'Cause
very good strategy because I mean it's really easy to pay out the wazoo for something like Gen Con.
Yeah. And so it becomes this process of like trying to figure out, okay, what's the cheapest Airbnb, and will the Ubers I take there and back, what's that difference look like between other places? And so I make a little chart and then I figure it out. And so
Sure.
that plus looking at my overall inventory, which wasn't as bad as I thought, and printing and figuring out my tactics. And it's been a rush. It's been like a 2-day rush here. And then they're having a problem putting my payment through, which
Hmm.
sucks. Because I don't have another way to do that. But I talked to the person about it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't worry." So yeah, I made a joke earlier. I was like, "Why is it so hard for me to give you money?
Right. Just take my money, damn
Just
it.
take it. I'm trying to give it to you." No, they don't take certain kinds of cards, and I didn't know that.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah. So what's your preparation look like?
Um, I'm not very good at the preparation stuff, honestly. I'm really not the best one to ask because I just kind of throw things together. I have stuff that's left over from doing Emerald City and Gen Con earlier this year, and I don't really have any special preparations in mind for Rose City. It's just kind of let's see how much of this remaining inventory I can sell and just see how it goes. It's my first time to that con as well, so I don't really know what to expect. It's a little bit smaller than Emerald City and a lot smaller than Gen Con, so
Mhm.
who knows?
Yeah. So I guess we'll see. I don't know. I was looking at the map. The map, they have it more crowded than I think Wizard World Portland was,
Okay.
which
In
seems,
tables, that kind of thing, you mean?
yeah, the tables are definitely more crowded. So I hope that works to an advantage, actually. That gives me hope that more people are going to be there and then they have bigger names kind of there.
Sure.
I looked at some of the exhibitors going and kind of picked the prints I wanted to bring from looking at that and what people might be going for.
Hmm.
But like, I was talking while I was doing that and saying like, you as someone who does landscapes, you have a huge advantage to somebody like me. Like I wish 5 years ago I could have gone back and been like, you're only going to paint armor because you love that. So I have so many different things.
Well, people love armor. I mean, there's people who do knights and things of that nature for a living. Like, it's just about finding the archetypes that people buy into,
Hmm.
and cultivating those audiences, I guess.
So what have your conventions looked like in the past? Like as far as getting your foot in the door, what are some movements you've made at conventions to get your name out there?
Um, I I don't know. Well, okay. So at Emerald City, I actually missed an opportunity to get my name out there more.
Yeah.
Someone from like the Wacom booth came by and they were looking for artists
Yeah.
to volunteer, and I did actually volunteer to do that. But then they like I don't know, they had a scheduling conflict or something, and then I was like, it's not worth it. I just rather get back to my booth and sell to people, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. I also missed an opportunity. Emerald City has this thing where they have like a charity book or something that they do. It's like what is it? It's like Monsters and Dames, I think it's called. So that would have been a good thing. Like if I could, in future get in that and be involved with that more, that might be good for getting my name out there more. Um, I'm trying to get better about letting people know that I'm going to be at these conventions. So eventually, uh, my website and more stuff with my mailing list should hopefully help people who've already demonstrated they're fans of the work know that I'm going to be at these various conventions.
Right. And you know who would be a great person to help you with that website? I looked at it earlier today and I was like, well, you don't even have a store. You need a store.
Yeah, I know. I don't have a store. I want to move to Squarespace. That's my next big website thing. I'm going to move to Squarespace. I'm going to establish what my new IP is going to be. So I guess look for that in the next year or so. Um, and it will involve a store. That will be kind of like the next development of my business, I guess. This year
Good.
was about exploring the first few conventions and kind of getting a feel for that. And then next year is going to be exploring things like Kickstarter, Patreon, and an online store and seeing
And
how those things can kind of fold in.
that was a decision for you. You said this year I'm going to do conventions.
Yeah.
How many have you been to so far?
Oh, geez. Emerald City, Mythic Worlds, that's also in Seattle. Norwest Con, also in Seattle, where you complained that I was following you because I just randomly showed up at the same party after party that you were at.
Were you showing at that?
Nope, nope.
Oh,
I
okay.
was checking it out for next year, and I met the show organizers, and they seem very excited about the possibility of me exhibiting there next year. So that might be a worthwhile relationship to develop. We'll see. And then Spectrum and Gen Con and PAX Dev.
Oh, did
And
you go to PAX? Okay.
I didn't go to PAX West, which is kind of the consumer facing.
Mhm.
I found it kind of overwhelming the one time I went, and there wasn't really much of an artist focus unless you're an artist at like a major studio. It didn't really seem that valuable in terms of my time and money for that purpose. And then AluxCon will be the last one for this year.
So just a ton. Yeah.
A
And you had to
ton,
sign
but
up for all these last year.
yeah, I mean that's the thing with cons. You do have to plan a year out. Like, oh, I definitely want this one. You need to make a calendar. You need to look up and find out when the submission times are for all of these, so you don't miss those windows because it's very easy to miss your submission window if you're not really paying attention. Um, and I think it's a good idea to start with a few and then kind of build out. I mean, this year I only I'm only exhibiting at four conventions, I guess, and all of the rest of those were just seeing how they were, doing a little bit of networking, um, or in some cases, a lot of networking. Um, Interestingly enough, some of the conventions that are smaller are sometimes really great for networking.
Yeah, because
And
people have time.
yeah, like you go to Mythic Worlds and that kind of, like on the last day and it's like half deserted. The artists are bored out of their minds and they're
Mm.
planning like their after con get together and you're going to have some nice bonding time with those people.
Right. I had the opposite thing happen to me at Gen Con last year. I was talking to So I did not go as an exhibitor,
Hmm.
but I spent like an entire day talking to artists because it was very slow in the artist alley. It was like this nice
Yeah.
little, not chaotic part. And so it was easy to sit around and talk to other artists, not taking up too much of their time, but getting my
Yeah.
name out there. And it was like halfway through the second day, and I was like, I don't think any of these artists are going to give me a job. So
Well,
I, what?
I I don't know that that's true. I mean, yes and no. Actually, so talking about getting your foot in the door, my biggest breaks have all come from fellow artists who said, "Oh, I don't have time to take on this opportunity,"
Mhm.
or "This thing is a landscape thing and it's not really my thing, but I know someone who is all about landscapes. Let me forward this client over to Bruce."
And that happened, but after a while, I was just returning to. I guess what I'm saying is like the first day I talked to all of the artists and took up
Hmm.
the time that I felt needed to be taken up with them. I mean, I was still networking, still talking to them after the show, but during the show hours, I got out and showed my portfolio to art directors. And I think because it was such a busy show, they were like, "Oh wow, an artist! I haven't been able to make it to the art alley because I'm working in one of these. I'd love to like stop doing what I'm doing and take a look at you," which sounds counterintuitive, but I don't think they liked working cash registers.
Oh
So,
yeah, well that's something that I think they mentioned on One Fantastic Week the other day
oh,
about how strange it is that all of these gaming companies bring their art directors to something like Gen Con
mhm.
and then just have them like handing out t-shirts and working the cash register. Like what a like counterproductive use of your art director's time, honestly.
I have a lot of qualms with some of the things I've seen art directors do. One thing I really did not enjoy was the Gen Con one, the Pathfinder art director, I think only did reviews for like an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then I saw her during the show, and I said, "Listen, I because you did so few, I didn't have the opportunity." Very nicely, I said, I cannot, I didn't get in your spot," and she was like, "Oh, too bad." And then she went back to doing what she was doing, and I was, man,
Well,
what? That's what you're supposed to be doing, right?
right, you'd think. I guess that's one of those situations where, she's been told to do whatever by her
I know. Yeah.
bosses. So she's like, oh, well, missed your chance there. But if you happened to catch her at, one of the hotel bars or something like afterwards, then maybe she'd be more up for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. It's just back to what you were saying about it being. It's kind of counterintuitive if they're working at those things.
Yeah, yeah. It's just, I mean, it's like, why are you bringing an art director? You could hire someone with, I don't know, like from like retail sales experience, and you'd probably get better better
Right.
results for like doing the cashiering stuff than having like some art director do it. That's just why.
Right. And the benefit too, like I got 2 or 3 jobs from walking around with a little book I'd made of my portfolio and showing it to people. And
Yeah,
one time actually, it wasn't even an art director. It was just the director of this small
sure.
company, and they were like, "Oh, I've seen this painting before. Do you have a print of it?" And I just gave it to them. They were going to buy it, and I was like, "No, just take it." And we worked together later on. It was a really great experience.
It's fantastic. Yeah, and that's something to keep in mind is that not every company has an art director, and there are other people at the company who can make hiring decisions. Um,
Mhm.
this so one story I definitely wanted to share today was about the stuff that I'm currently doing. I'm doing a lot of work for Monty Cook Games on the Numenera stuff, Numenera RPG setting. They've got me doing a bunch of stuff for their upcoming Kickstarter at the moment, and that was a client that I kind of had my eye on for a while now. Like I really liked what they were doing. I liked their setting. I thought it was a good fit for the kind of art that I wanted to do.
Mhm.
But I got to the point where I'm now working with them through such a long and convoluted process that involved uh, two various artists I had met um, recommending me for jobs and helping me out with networking aspects of things. One director of a company, not art director, who I was able to meet at PAX Dev last year, and again because a friend who had him as a client previously recommended me. They're like, oh, you need a landscape guy, like Bruce is your guy. And then I was at the conference that this director was actually helping to organize, and I knew he was there. I knew he was very involved with it, so I was able to track him down and show him my art in person and really make a great impression there. And then I was doing art that was cross-licensed between the two companies. So the company that I had kind of had my eye on for a while was seeing my art coming in. On, you know, I mean, I guess logically I should have known that that was the case, but it was just kind of quietly happening. And then at NorwestCon, at that random after party where we were, and I don't remember, maybe you remember this, like we were chatting out on the
Yeah.
hotel balcony, and we were chatting with a guy named Bruce Cordell,
Yeah. I
who's
remember him.
and writer. And we are just kind of chatting, and I didn't really know that much about him. But then after you left, I was like, so I'm actually not that familiar with you. And it turns out he's like one of the principal designers and writers for Monty Cook games.
Really? And I think he had just finished a book that he had written that wasn't to do with Monty Cook games, right?
Yeah. Well, it was, well, I don't know. It might
Maybe
have
it
been
was.
set in a different Monty Cook game setting, actually, because I think I know which book you're talking about. I
Okay.
saw it in Todd's studio.
Yeah,
If it's the one I'm of.
I'll have to go
Um,
look.
yeah, so I met him, and I was like, well, you know, I'm wanting to work with you guys. I've been doing a lot of work via Loan Shark. And then he's like, oh yeah, we've been getting all this great art in. I bet you're the guy. Let me introduce you to the art director. Like next day already, he like connects with me on Facebook and connects me to the art director. And then I find out that that art director is going to be at Spectrum a week later because he lives in that part of the country. So then I had an opportunity to meet him in person and show my work and kind of, you know, get that personal touch. Like meeting people in person is really important. It's just how we are as human beings. And then some months after that, I finally heard from them, oh, we've got some stuff for you. We've got a lot of stuff for you. Like, are you available for it? So it was a journey of 1 year and a lot of steps that all reinforced each other. So I think that's a really big part of getting your foot in the door is don't assume it's going to be a one-step deal. Don't assume it's going to be a quick or easy thing. It's going to be many different things that you're doing are all reinforcing each other.
One thing I want to point out about that is that all of those situations required you personally taking initiative, though.
Yeah.
To do something, to ask somebody or talk to, you know, you talk about, oh, I used to be a wallflower, and now you're a guy, you know, racing after people and tackling them for jobs at conventions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, I mean, there's other people in my life, you know, friends and such who are kind of like setting it up there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of your art cave. You know, I think deciding what are some companies that you really, really want to work for and doing a little bit of stalking, like getting to know a little bit more about where they are in their business plans and stuff. Like having that information sets you up to be able to take those steps and really knock it out of the park when the opportunity comes along.
Right. No, I think so. And not being afraid to do those things either is a big part of it.
No. Yeah, and a few years ago, I probably would have been a lot more afraid. But you know, each success kind of builds on the last. You're like, oh, that wasn't so scary. That wasn't too bad. Maybe I can go a little further. Maybe I can try this other thing that I haven't tried yet.
That's a good thing. Yeah, one thing that gets me very excited is trying things I haven't tried before. that's why like getting ready for conventions can be so exciting for me, because I'm thinking about all the new things I can do in my career or to talk to people. But no, a lot of the good things that have happened in my career, and I've talked about, maybe I could have been more pointed, but a lot of the good things happened because I said, I've never done this before, so why not? I've got, I can spend at least a day or a week on it. I'm willing to commit a week to something I've never tried before. And that's
Sure.
all, that has been like the greatest gift that I've given my career.
Wow, that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, if you're like, okay, like a week doesn't cost me that much, right? I can invest a week into something new and see how it goes.
Mm.
It's a manageable risk to take, right? And a lot of this is about taking manageable risks, like going to new conventions, exhibiting, or even just exploring them to see if, okay, like, I can get to this place, I can check it out, see if it's worth a bigger investment next year, like that kind of thing.
That's something, a word I like to use a lot is invest. And that's the word that got me to do Smart School in the first place. A word that got me in conventions, doing conventions in the first place, is like anytime something comes up that I'm not sure about, I say, well, then you're not willing to invest this in your life or in your
Yeah,
career. And even something as simple as like, oh, I don't want to go talk to that person, I'm shy. And it's like, well, you didn't want this in the first place. You didn't want to invest in it.
right.
And that's
You
how I talk myself out of it.
need to put a little bit of skin in the game, put your money where your mouth is, and of course, I mean, there are costs involved. Like, it's important to be mindful of the fact that there are a lot of people who might not have the money immediately to invest in going to a bunch of conventions, or going across the country for a prime networking opportunity. But
Right.
if you have it in your plan, like, oh, this is a thing that I really need to do, possibly you can, I don't know, forego some, going out to restaurants or something for a while, and you can save up the money to do that in a year or two, however long it takes. If this is the career that you want, you're going to be willing to figure out how you can invest it. It might take a while to get to that point. For me, I went to China for 6 years. My living costs there were super low. I was saving up $1,000 a month. They weren't paying very much, but I was able to save up that much each month, which is probably more than a lot of people here in the States can say.
Mhm.
I came back with, like 20 or $30,000 in like cushion money. I paid off my school loans, so I didn't have that deficit going on a monthly basis. And I set myself up for a situation where if there's a bad con, or if I need to spend some money to go across the country to do like illustration masterclass, or take smart school, I have that money. It's not going to be my financial ruin
Mhm.
if it doesn't pan out. But I know from looking at other people's experiences with these things, like, oh, there's a very good chance that this experience will be a very good investment, and I'm not, like,
Right.
I'm safe.
You're you're
I can do
you're
it.
good at that. You're good at saying like, and also that's another part of networking with all these different people, is it gives you a bit the ability to say, was this con good, or should I make this decision? Tell me about your thoughts on it. And that's
Yeah.
the community. Yeah, I was talking to somebody yesterday uh, about pricing my prints, and they said, well, how do you know what to price your prints? And I said, well, I ask everyone else.
Yeah.
And they looked at me real strange, and I was like, no, that's the community we have.
Yeah. It's not
We
a secret. We're giving community. It's an amazing community, and that makes so much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, we're competitive because we have to be, but it's a good competition. It's we
Yeah.
all want everyone else to make a lot of money, which is really good, and also succeed in their art, in their career
Yeah.
when we go to shows. So yeah. Well, is there anything you want to plug before we go? What are you working on? Is there some place, where can people go to find you?
Well, I mean, they can go to myname.com, which is, brucebrenneise.com. I know my last name is really kind of a mouthful. The longer term plan, of course, for the next few years is to have my own IP. I promise it will be easier to remember and say than Bruce Brenneise, but it's not quite here yet. So that's the place to see my art. I'm doing a lot of work for Monte Cook Games Numenera. Um, they're gonna have a Kickstarter soon, like in the next month and a half, something like that. So you'll probably see a lot of my art there. Um, and honestly, I'm gonna plug someone else's thing here. That art business boot camp that Mark and Lauren doing, very well worth the money. It
Right.
has been open to new subscribers for like the last 2 years, but they're opening it up again, like right now. So I would encourage anyone listening to this, if you're not already part of that community, like that is a very good, relatively small investment that paid off very well for me. And I would say it's a very good investment for you to consider too.
Oh, is it something that comes out serially? Like,
So they kind of like they were, I guess you would say I was part of their inaugural run,
mhm.
and they were trying out a lot of things. A lot of things were, like maybe just work in progress in some sense. So I guess they've spent the last couple years sort of analyzing how they did and what they wanted to do differently. And now they're at a point where they're ready to offer these things again. They're also offering some intensives on very specific topics like presenting yourself verbally as an artist, doing Kickstarters. They've got Stephanie Law teaching that particular
I saw that. Yeah.
intensive. Like those are all very worthwhile. The intensives all look really, really good. Also, I have to say I've put my money where my mouth is on that one. I'm taking the Stephanie Law one, and I'm very strongly considering taking the other two ones that they've got. But they're also opening up the boot camp, which I think is just incredible value for money.
Okay. Well, yeah. All right. Well, that'll be it. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you have something you want to talk about or want us to talk about, you can get us at hangingoutpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Hanging Out with Bear and Allen on Facebook. Let us know what you think. And yeah, that's it. Good talking to you, Bruce.
Good talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. See you next week.